We have a top war analyst joining us now. John Spencer is chair of urban warfare studies, and he's joining me from Colorado. Thank you so much, John, for joining us. Are we looking at a point of no return in this Israel-Iran conflict, or is there still, one would say, John, a viable back channel of diplomacy operating beneath the surface?
Well, war is always a contest of will, and it always has a political objective. So ultimately, yes, the diplomatic measures, and you would hope that the Islamic regime in Iran would have some rationale and basically agree to that diplomatic solution. But absolutely, that's still a chance for that. And that is, from all that I'm seeing, despite Israel's dominance of Iran's skies right now and what it's eliminating in Iran, that there is this massive push. And just from the President Trump perspective, I wouldn't wait for the 2-week mark. I think President Trump is waiting till he needs to or can assist, although Israel is doing a really good job on destroying Iran's nuclear program. They've killed 14 of 15 nuclear scientists. They've taken out every site, nuclear site except Fordo, the deeper buried one. The U.S. National Security Council is now meeting daily on the situation. So although since this operation started on the 61st day of the 60 days that President Trump gave Iran, Iran shouldn't take Trump's timelines as not serious, but I think you could still see options of the U.S. assisting to end the conflict quicker. Everybody wants a diplomatic end. And lastly, it's pretty ridiculous that Iran would say they had no part in striking a hospital. Their propaganda machine rivals that of Pakistan and what we saw in Operation Sindoor.
So how has Israel's recent military strategy effectively crossed Tehran's red lines? And what do you think Iran's likely next move will be? Will it be retaliation or restraint?
So at this moment, I don't see Iran showing any restraint, but Israel is not only hitting their over 20 senior commanders, they just eliminated the next head of the military that Iran appointed to the military. They've also taken out Iran's ability to retaliate. So they've taken out 40 to 50% of Iran's rocket launchers, because that's really the main and only way that Iran has an ability to retaliate to Israel specifically, although they could activate proxies across the Middle East and even in other countries like the United States. But right now, mainly Iran can retaliate with ballistic missiles, but Israel is showing immense amounts of capability to target that capability before it's launched and to defend against it. There's recent strikes as of today, and Iran had zero impact of their ballistic missiles, and the United States is positioning more aircraft carriers into the region that are basically a defense. So I don't know about red lines. Israel's objective is very clear. Iran's objectives are less clear on what they're trying to achieve, other than to reach some type of position where they keep their nuclear program, which now you have the world. I mean, even the G7 conference, Iran cannot have a nuclear program.
But Donald Trump's 2-week deadline, I mean, what does that mean militarily or diplomatically? Is it bluster or a sign of some serious intent?
No, I think it's serious intent. The president has been a man of his word thus far, especially since he took office. And I know that 2-week mark has been kind of normal for him in his talking. But again, the 60 days was a real 60 days. And on the 61st day, Israel attacked. 2 weeks, you can see all the systems. It's all part of the diplomacy. It's to show readiness and willingness to help it achieve the goals. And so I think the 2-week mark is a real mark, but with the National Security Council meeting daily, Israel's doing a really good job of reducing Iran's capabilities. And you would think at this point they would show rationale, just like Pakistan did after 4 days, saying, look, we don't want any more of this. But the Islamic regime is trying to battle and save face, because if it truly gives up its incomplete nuclear program, it won't exist as it does today. It's part of its center philosophy for existing is the building of a nuclear bomb to be able to do what it wants to do in the Middle East.
But John, has the Biden administration's calibrated silence on Israel's offensive in fact emboldened Netanyahu or limited his room for escalation? How do you look at it?
Well, I mean, the Trump administration has, of course, been involved in the planning and acknowledgement because this was a global threat. There was real U.S. bases in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and others that would be under, and we saw them being evacuated before this. So clearly, the United States administration has been working hand in hand as Israel took this act by themselves out of survival. I think they're in close coordination daily, probably, to ensure that there isn't that broader spillover that you were talking about, such as the Straits of Hormuz and basically the global oil economy, things like that nobody wants to see. And whether the United States, and I think this is why President Trump does have room to wait right now. The United States doesn't have to, although it could speed with like hitting the Fordo site with the U.S. bomb that only the United States has, that would end the goal of rolling back the nuclear program quicker. But nobody wants to see that broader spillover and escalation. So the United States, of course, is monitoring and communicating with Israel and what they're striking and things like that on a day-to-day basis.
But then, is there a clear U.S.-Israel operational understanding on Iran? Or, John, are we witnessing a case of strategic divergence?
No, absolutely not. I think you actually see for once, as the United States' foreign policy has failed in Iran to curtail its nuclear program, you actually see alignment with the United States and Israel in achieving the goal of removing this threat. I mean, Iran was also developing an intercontinental ballistic missile to be able to hit other countries, to include the shores of the United States. This is a real threat to the world. And I think you see an alignment here. Even in the past, when you saw Israel striking the Iraq nuclear site and the Syria nuclear site, there was not alignment, although eventually there was basically agreement that it was necessary. But at the time, there was stiff even sanctions and political statements against Israel for taking it into their own hands. But this time, I think there's strong alignment in the goal.
Okay, then what about Hezbollah and Iran's proxy networks? And what role do you think they will play if this becomes a wider war? And then can the US afford another regional engagement?
Yeah, so to be clear, the United States and the world can't afford Iran with a nuclear weapon. I know it's hard to put this war in context with previous regional wars like the invasion of Iraq that I took part of, but this intelligence, I mean, the IAEA saying that for the first time in 20 years, Iran was in violation of non-nuclear proliferation and was developing nuclear components for a bomb. Yes, the proxies that Iran has spent, the billions of dollars that the United States gave, or sanctions relief that the United States gave in a hope that Iran would just magically give up its program, is how it built these ring of fire around Israel, and Hezbollah being the crown jewel, which still is believed to have 40%, 50% of its medium range missiles that could do a lot of harm in Israel. But right now, it seems that Hezbollah has been deterred by Iran in its overwhelming military operation that Israel has done against Iran, has deterred Hezbollah, but it's an absolute real threat, as well as the Shia-backed militias in Iraq. The Houthis still have some capability, and then you have a concern about like sleeper cells in everybody's countries. As of right now, it seems that either Iran's holding that capability till it views itself in dire constraint or dire need, but also that these elements have been weakened and that they're deterred. So there might be a divergence between the Ayatollahs and these even terror proxies that they have built.
And how do you look at these nuclear sites in Iran which are being floated as legitimate military targets by Israel, and how dangerous is that rhetoric in terms of global fallout?
So this is, my personal opinion is that they weren't perceived legitimate targets. They're absolutely legitimate targets under any doctrine, from the Caroline Doctrine to Article 51 of self-defense. This was a real, clear, present danger to Israel, since the Ayatollah said it was death to Israel and then death to America. I think these are all of those nuclear sites are the strongest legitimate targets, especially for the goal that Israel has set. Israel doesn't have the goal at this moment of regime change. If it's a byproduct, that's great for the people of Iran. But the targeting of this real threat to Israel and to other countries in the Middle East, as well as the United States, the Natanz nuclear site, Isfahan, the Fordow, the plutonium enrichment site, all very legitimate targets in this act of self-defense that Israel has done. And I think I'm pretty sure that's an international norm, that this would be clear, legitimate targets. And the ripple effect across the kind of global perspective is this is why you can't have terror regimes achieving nuclear weapons. It would lead to proliferation, because if Iran had a nuclear weapon, Saudi Arabia would want one, other countries would want one from self-defense, from what this terror proxy, this terror regime says it wants its nuclear program. It doesn't want clean energy. It wants the ability to cause mass destruction against other countries so it can continue its global export of terrorism, much like Pakistan does.
We know the role of certain countries in the Middle East, and also about the European countries. But what about China and Russia? Where do you see these two countries in this entire conflict?
Yeah, surprisingly, everybody was looking to Russia to see what Russia would do. And although Iran and Russia signed a security agreement in 2024, Iran has been helping Russia in its campaign in Ukraine. It wasn't a mutual defense agreement. So when Iran called Russia, Russia said, "You're on your own." Vladimir Putin even talked to President Trump about helping to mediate a end of basically the operation. And President Trump told him, "How about you worry about mediating and ending the war in Ukraine?" Now, China is also a different car without as strong relationship. There was some reporting that China was sending military supplies. I'm not sure if that was true or not. Hopefully that's not true. And there should be kind of a global conversation about this is about a very limited objective, and nobody should be helping Iran continue a nuclear program at this moment. And that there should be this. I agree that there's many European countries in Geneva right now, and they talked about Oman getting back to the table. This is Iran's chance to actually negotiate in good faith, which it wasn't doing before.
Couple of questions, and I want to understand, President Donald Trump saw himself as a peacemaker, and he was hoping that he would have stopped the Russia-Ukraine war. That was not to be. And if now he has set that 14-day deadline, 2 weeks to be specific, according to the White House, how, does it really weaken the role of United States? It's appearing to be almost a country which is going to be triggering it, making it worse, perhaps escalating it rather than de-escalation?
No, I think the opposite is actually actualizing the peace through strength motto that President Trump was elected for. While America first doesn't mean isolationism or disengaging from the global economy, it's actually the opposite. You saw President Trump in the Middle East recently with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the Emirates signing $600 billion trade deals with the Sunni kind of the people who aren't trying to destroy their neighbors. And that's a positive. And I think this, although the Russia-Ukraine war is an illegal throwing out the international norms, actually keeps peace, like sovereign borders that we kind of should all agree on is a thing that should be upheld. And the operations that Russia is doing in Ukraine, it's awful. But in this case, no, I think this is showing actually what peace through strength looks like, and it isn't starting a forever war, it's ending a forever war in Islamic regimes, global terror proxies. I had soldiers die in Iraq from the Quds Force, IRGC in Iraq, attacking American forces. No, I think this is showing, and even without being involved at this point, political leadership, much like Prime Minister Modi did with Pakistan, saying, look, we're not going to do the nuclear blackmail thing, the two-sided face of terrorism, say you're helping against it and then deploying terrorists into everybody's countries, in this case, especially India's. No, I think this is like Prime Minister Modi's strategic leadership during Sindor. This is showing President Trump's leadership in a conflict that other people were kicking down the road in a specific area. This isn't about a quagmire of trying to build another nation or what comes after the regime. This is about removing an imminent threat to Israel and to the United States and other countries.
John, really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts.